What is happening, Hypesters? Welcome back to the HypeHype Live. It's going to be a demo-heavy day today. I have a bunch of stuff prepared to show you, semi-prepared. And we're going to kick things off with the cinematic tools. There was a lot of questions about them last week, a new feature in the most recent update. I've spent the last couple of days messing around with it, learning more about it, so that today I can show all of you how to work with the cinematic tools. And I think without further ado here, let us jump into this cinematic tools demo. So let's jump in. Cinematic tools, I've set up a little bit of a scene here, mostly because it's going to be easier as we do this to have some points of reference in our world. If we were just on an empty plane and we're working with like animation stuff, it might not read as well. And so the basic idea of the cinematic tracks and the timeline node, which is two things, they're always going to go hand in hand. You can't use one without the other. The idea is basically that you can set up a timeline, and on that timeline, you can have a bunch of different properties, and then each of those properties can have keyframes so that they can change over time, and then it can output that to other objects or nodes within your hype. Let's take a quick look at how this works, and then maybe we can delve in a little bit deeper. And so right off the bat, one of the things that can be a little tricky about working with this is that you frequently do have to jump back and forth between the cinematic tracks and the timeline node. So I'm going to start here under actions. We have the timeline. Where did it put it? There it is. It was back there by my camera. So we have the timeline node. You can find that in the actions section. Right now, it's not going to do anything. We open it up here. We have a few settings that we can set, but a key setting in here is the track, and we don't have any tracks yet, so we cannot set that up. One thing I am going to do here, well, I'll do it when we come back. So for now, we just got the node. Cool. Now we're going to go to a hamburger menu, and then here in the resources, we have cinematic tracks. And so this is where all our tracks can be. We can have multiple cinematic tracks, and then each track within it can have multiple properties. But the timeline node can only use one track at a time, one cinematic track at a time. For ease of this demo, I might refer to the cinematic tracks as timelines. I think it's a little bit easier, but I will try, at least in this demo, to use the terminology that's currently in the game. So let's call this cinema demo track. All right. So now we have a track. It still doesn't have anything in it. We can hit the pencil over here, and all we can do there is change the name. We can obviously hit the trash can and we'll delete it, neither of which we want to do right now. But I'll tap on the cinematic track. Now it takes us to another menu, and this is the menu where we can start actually adding properties to our cinematic track. And most of the stuff that you're going to do in this menu happens in the Actions tab here. We can see a lot of stuff is grayed out right now because it's related to things that we can do on each individual track, and we don't have any yet, so they're all grayed out. I am going to start with an object track. It's maybe not the simplest one, but I think as far as a demo goes, it'll cover a lot of the bases, and we'll get an idea about how this can work. And it's also kind of one of the cooler properties we have in here because it can do a bunch of things that would normally take you quite a few nodes to accomplish. So we're going to call this the Johannes track. And this is our object track. Now, the thing about the object track is that it needs an object reference to work. So we're going to have to back out here. And this is another thing, a little bit tricky. If you're used to the editor, you're used to how the editor works, when you are in this particular menu, you can't close it by tapping things outside of the menu. And the reason is because you can actually grab stuff and move it around while you're in this menu. You're going to want to be able to do that, and you'll see why in just a moment. But for now, we need to back out with the back arrow up there in the upper left-hand corner. We're going to close out. We're going to go to our timeline. Now we can set our track. We've added the track there, our cinema demo track, and we can see that in the inputs, we got the Johannes track. So all of our properties are going to appear as either inputs or outputs in the timeline node. So here we're just going to set Johannes as our object. And that's all we need to do. Actually, one other thing we want to do right now. By default, this transform type is on global. It's probably going to be easier to put it in the absolute so that it's using absolute world coordinates. And that way, just the changes that you make while you're in the editor, you know you're going to get the same ones. So that's a tip from me. Take it or leave it. But I'm going to do it. So we'll deselect that. We'll go back into our cinematic tracks. And now in the Johannes track, we have an object, so we can start adding keys, deleting keys. And the cool thing we can do with the object track is we can record. And what that'll do is, well, I'll show you here. We're going to turn that on. So we've got record mode on, and I'm saying I would like Johannes to start way back here. And automatically, it's made a keyframe for me. And now I can drag this playhead. You can see the number underneath the playhead there. That's the time. So we're at about 1 second here. We're going to drag it out. Let's say like maybe around 3 seconds, something like that. It takes Johannes to walk up to the camera. All right, so now we have an action set in there. I deselected him. You can see he popped back to that starting position. Let's back out and see what happens. The timeline's going to play automatically. So boom, it plays. There's Johannes walking up to the camera. We can go jump back into the track there. And let's say, you know, maybe I want that to be a little bit longer. I can drag this keyframe out a little bit further. And also, maybe I want Johannes here to, whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Luckily, it pops back. I want Johannes here to get a little bit closer. And actually, I think I need to turn the record mode back on to do that. There we go. Now it should have updated the position in that keyframe. So we do it again, and we see, boom, there we go. Now he's coming a little bit closer. Super. So that was the first step, right? We gotta walk in Johannes, or it's not walking, he's sliding, and that's a little bit of a problem. So we're gonna go back into, in the cinema demo track, we wanna make a new property track, which will be our animation track. Did I say track enough times in that explanation? So here we've now got an animation track. We've got to go find our playhead. It's probably at the end here. There it is. Another thing that can be a little cumbersome about working with this tool right now is the way the playhead works. We're hoping to get some improvements to that. But boom, here we are back at the beginning, and we're going to say add a key. And now this one, we need to actually edit that key. We don't have the record mode, so we're going to go to actions again, and we're going to say edit key. And now we have this menu where we can set some things about this. If we change the time, that's going to change the position of the keyframe to that exact time that you type into the field. Obviously, animation here, this is what we kind of want. We're going to put it to a run animation. And then you have the option to loop that animation. And then we're going to go back here to the other. I probably should have made that the second keyframe first, just because we were already there. But we're going to go find where the second keyframe is. There it is. This is where Johannes stops. And I'm just going to back it a little bit more. We're going to add a new key. We're going to edit that key. And the animation is going to be stand, idle. So now we can also snap, which is nice. So we hit the magnet, we have some snapping modes. And basically the way these work is when you move keyframes around, you can snap them either to other keyframes on the track above or below, or you can snap them to an interval. In this case, I want to snap them to the keyframe that we have up there. So I'm going to grab my keyframe, I'm going to drag it, and you can see when I got close, snapped right there. So now if I back out here and we play this, we should get, oh, I didn't set up the target. So now we got that animation track that also needs to target Johannes. No. Animation track. Now we've got that connected. If we play it, there we go. We've got a running animation, and when he stops, we go back to the idle animation. So there we go, and we can do now more with that. Let's say, for example, let's go back into our cinematic track. And we have our, oh, we gotta go find that playhead again. Let's select our guy here, and now we can see with the guy selected, as we move this around, we can see the interpolation between the two keyframes, right? So we go back to the very beginning and he's there. But let's say maybe we want to go, we're going to have him like run a little bit of a circle. So we go to here and I'm going to toggle that record again. And let's move him to the side a little bit. There we go. Now let's move it up a little bit more. Maybe about there, and let's move him to the other side. And now he's gonna do a little bit of a curve path, right? But the rotation's gonna be a little bit weird, right? So maybe we want to kind of like, as he comes this way, we want to rotate him a little bit. Right before we get to this keyframe, we want him to still be rotated. And then right after that keyframe, we want him to kind of rotate the other way. And then we'll do the same thing here. So this will be like, boom, we'll rotate him a little bit. I have no idea how well this is going to work, by the way. I'm just kind of messing around here. Let's see. Let's see if it does what I think it's going to do. Boom, runs, turns, runs, back. All right. That last rotation was maybe a little bit too far, but you get the idea. It worked. And like, to do what I just did there with mover nodes, wave generators, whatever you're going to do to make that work just with nodes would take so many nodes. Right? You have like a pretty complex movement there that's going to take a bunch of different nodes working in unison, and here we can do it all in one node. So that's super. So where were we? We made an animation track, we made a movement track, and those are the two object tracks. So we can see in here, those are going to require object input to work, and then it's going to apply your timeline to that object. Some of the other properties are going to output values. So we can go back into our cinematics track here. We can add a new track. Color's kind of a fun one, but just to keep it simple, let's say number. We're just going to output a simple number. And then again, we need to find our playhead here. Let's take it back to the beginning. All right, so now we have a number node. Or a number track, sorry. I'm going to add a key here. Again, I'm going to edit this key. And so again here, we have a few different options. The options are going to be slightly different depending on which property we're working with. Again, we have the time. The value is obviously the value that the number is going to be on that keyframe. Let's say we start at 5. And let's start it exactly at 0. But we could say, just like every time... Oh, this I can't. Is it still? It's no snap up, but I think it's not because there's no keyframe on the one directly above us. So we can't exactly snap this the way that I would like to. Hopefully we'll be able to do that in the future. But we're going to set a second keyframe there. We're going to edit the key. Let's say this one is 10. Cool. We go down here further. After this, let's put one around this turn. We'll add a key. We'll edit the key. This value will be like 50. I'm just throwing some numbers in here so that we can visualize how this is working. We go down a little bit more. We go to this second turn, and we're going to add another key. We'll say this value is 100. Boom. And then we'll go to the end, which is here. Add key, edit key, and We'll bring the value all the way back down to 0. Okay, so now we have a number track that's spitting out a bunch of values, right? And for now, we just need to visualize those numbers, right? There's a lot of different things you can use values for in HypeHype. But for now, we just want to see how this is working. So I'm going to take this number track. I'm going to output it to the value of a text node. Let's make this center large so we can see it. And again, I'll just hit play. And we can see how the values are interpolating between those different keyframes. Boom. We've looked at object properties. We've looked at value properties. There are a few more value properties in here. So if we go back in the track here, we can also make a vector, which will obviously send a vector instead of a single number. If you don't know what a vector is, it's like multiple numbers at once. It's most commonly used in HypeHype to share stuff like world coordinates, maybe some rotation data, although there's a different tool for that now. But you know what I mean. It's going to be a single set of numbers. Usually in HypeHype, 3 values, X, Y, and Z. And then we also have color, which color you would think would go to an object, but I believe it does actually output if we go to the timeline node here. So yeah, color is an output. So we could, if we wanted to output that, no, we can't output that directly to an object. So if we want to use the color, we're going to have to pass it through, for example, a color node, a color mix, a material modifier. Those are nodes that can use colors to make things happen. All right. And then finally, we have one of these things is not like the others, and that is the broadcast track. Obviously, I'm naming these all like super basic, just descriptive of what they are. When you're working, you probably want to name them something a little more directly related to whatever it is they're doing in your game, so that when you come back in here, you know what's doing what. But the thing about the broadcast links or the broadcast track is if we go to the timeline node again, there's no input or output for broadcast because that's just going to send broadcast signals, right? So if we go to the broadcast node, again, we got to find our playhead. I'm not going to worry about moving it all the way back to the beginning. We'll just make a key here. And we'll go edit that key. So directly in here, when I edit the key, I can pick one of the broadcast signals that I have in this hype. Let's say game success. We'll send a game success, and we'll send it when, whoops, right about there. I think that's, yeah. When Johannes gets to the end of his run. So the broadcast track is just going to send broadcast signals. So they don't require links. That's kind of the whole point of broadcast signals. If you don't know about broadcasters and broadcast listeners, I would definitely recommend looking into those a little bit more. They are very clinch for doing all kinds of things in HypeHype. I think we're going to end the cinematic tools demo with that. If you guys have any questions, I would happily spend a little bit more time on this, explain it a little bit deeper. But I think we've kind of covered the basics there. Of course, we could spend a little more time just kind of like making a little animation. But there are a few other nodes I would like to talk about.